associated development partners, civil society organizations, other distinguished participants, and guests. Good morning, or good afternoon to you all. First of all, I thank you for inviting Guyana, CARICOM, and the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth to learn from and share with the region on this panel. The governments and the people, especially the youth of Guyana, the land of many waters, the only English-speaking country in South America, and the Caribbean community would like to extend our highest regards and most sincere gratitude to the joint efforts of all participating leaders, guests, and representatives, as well as our most cordial congratulations on the success of this forum. Today, I sit before you with the pleasure and honor of representing the youth of our region as we agitate and mobilize in advancing the mandate of the 2030 Agenda, especially in the areas of employment, education, political and civic participation, intergenerational relations, migration, climate change, sexual and reproductive health, and gender equality, amongst others. The Regional Agenda for Inclusive Social Development is comprised of 4 axes, and I'll get into this as I get into my presentation on the challenges and the opportunities that the RASD presents for Caribbean people, especially its youth. Traditionally, Caribbean countries have taken a conservative approach to social development, but this has a lot to do with pre-existing socio-political dynamics and their spin-offs. Moreover, we have faced, individually and collectively, some key challenges to inclusive social development. There have been cases over the course of our collective histories of systematic deprivation of resources, as well as recognition of socio-political rights, especially in indigenous populations, that have allowed for the denial of participation in civic duty. This has also, in some cases, led to social apathy towards cooperation and civic engagement, more so in the not-so-distant past amongst the region's youth. We are also still plagued from time to time by a lack of political will to effectively cooperate not only for good governance, but more so for effective social audit and protecting the fundamental rights of our people. All this compounded by paltry political handouts with some predilection to societal enclaves that more often than not result in political tribalism and segregation. In turn, this can sometimes translate to a reversal of social developmental projects that worked previously, effectively denying and reversing socioeconomic development of our people, while shouldering them with the economic burden of so-called new and improved policy and programs. We still face either inadequate or corrupt social protection systems, especially in our police forces. And this results in either exploitation of persons or groups unaware of their rights and freedoms, or in their exposure to extreme elements of society that pose a risk to their general well-being. While some Caribbean countries have made, or rather most Caribbean countries have made remarkable progress in the promotion of the dimensions of human development, sustainability has been hampered by the effects of climate change and natural disasters on economies that are already overburdened. The Sendai framework, for example, while it's adopted, has not been fully realized amongst Caribbean countries because it recognizes that the state has the primary role to reduce disaster risk, with shared responsibility to other public and private sector stakeholders. What this means is that states are then stretched thin in their allocations to other areas such as health and education, being forced to make necessary but sociopolitically prudent but not necessarily sociopolitical prudent adjustments to development priorities. In light of the economic burdens these situations present, whether proactively or reactively, I assure you, climate change is not fake news. My own country, Guyana, its coastline sits 7 feet below sea level. The Dutch helped us to build a sea defense that stands at least 3 feet above the high tide level. And as we speak, my country is being inundated with floodwaters overtopping that wall. Climate change is real. It is not fake news. With few exceptions, the Caribbean community is made up of SIDS with volatile economies and political systems. Therefore, the greatest challenges facing the adoption and implementation of any or all parts of the regional agenda for inclusive social development include economic inability, especially for those small, less diversified economies, to promote and support social development whilst maintaining their other focal developmental areas. Outside of this, there may also be a lack of political will, and even in some cases, social will, to ensure sustainability of social development projects, such as those which address human rights of minorities like the LGBTQIAA and migrant populations. These challenges, of course, do not go unnoticed, as we are a resilient region. And we love each other, of course, and are being actively addressed by Caribbean governments, especially in the Southern Caribbean nations of Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados. And of course, like Suriname, we're not an island, we're a mainland country. But of course, even in all these contexts, we make these provisions in all relevant legal contexts for the welfare of all people. Case in point, for example, is the adoption of the Regional Information System, which Guyana just signed on to 2 days ago, right? That actually processes migrants and ensures their rights are protected whilst promoting equitable access to social goods and services, as well as their rights to decent life and well-being in an environment that is free from discrimination because of their status. These countries have identified priority areas that they believe are the foundation which shall bolster adjacent and associated levels of social protection systems, with a special focus on youth, as the Honorable Samantha Marshall mentioned earlier in her presentation, the young at heart, I don't like to say older persons, and persons with disabilities. This includes, but is not necessarily limited to, the areas of public health, education, human rights, and social protection. The recognition has been translated to concerted individual and collective action amongst these states, whereas CARICOM and the OSCS, for example, have been working with other regional and international stakeholders and development partners with the support of regional governments on consultations on best practices from both at home and abroad. Caribbean nations have also taken up the mantle in providing and improving social protection services, with some governments collaborating with civil society to protect our people from exploitation through social audit and improved remuneration and benefit to combat the scourge that is associated with an improper social protection system. Whilst we've also made significant strides in the access to SRH services, or sexual reproductive health services and education, more open, with significant improvement in social tolerance, there still remains a conservative element within Caribbean power structures that prevents the advancement of the cause of advocates for LGBTQIAA rights. This, of course, may vary with local context and is influenced more so by societal interest and will. Though youth unemployment still remains a sore topic, regional governments have moved to identify and promote alternative pathways to sustainable livelihoods, such as the promotion of the Sowing Life program right here in Mexico, as well as the Green State Development Strategy of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, spearheaded and effectively promoted by the Executive President, His Excellency Brigadier David Arthur Granger. Development partners and civil society have also been working on social empowerment projects such as the Cassava Plus Network, founded by Joel Colliers, my predecessor as CARICOM Youth Ambassador in Guyana. The CPN aims to promote the livelihood of primarily indigenous communities in Guyana, whilst of course ensuring that they benefit from local and regional initiatives. These local and regional initiatives, however, have suffered in the past due to non-alignment with national strategy, either due to a lack of political will or of the strategy itself. With the realization of free movement of goods and services across the Caribbean region in the form of the CSME, or CARICOM Single Market and Economy, alliances such as CARICOM and subsets such as the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States have helped to bolster alignment of employment and programs and opportunities for business development beyond the national context. Key drivers of these initiatives include organizations such as the National Youth Councils, the Pan-Caribbean Partnership on HIV and AIDS, the Caribbean Right Here, Right Now Network, Move On Guyana, the Aspire Youth Networks of the Caribbean, SAIPAN, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, etc. Their work is supported by brilliant minds such as Kirby Marie Cattell, Charlotte Desir, Dennis Glasgow, Jairo Rodriguez, Juliana Lopes, some colleagues of mine. Be rest assured then that there have been marked improvements in the realization of all the axes of the regional agenda for inclusive social development. And needless to say, all this stakeholder collaboration has been in line with the SDGs, particularly goals 1 through 5, 7, 8, 10, 13, as well as 15 through 17. What this then means is that there's a myriad of opportunities for the regional agenda for inclusive social development to become a mechanism for fostering and promoting inclusive social development in the Caribbean. The promotion of most of these elements already enshrined in the constitutions of Caribbean states, an example being that of Guyana, which speaks in Articles 24 through 37 of the preamble to issues such as medical and social care, rights of older persons, access to education from primary through tertiary, mind you, free education, youth, equality, women, and the environment, as well as the abolition of discrimination in all forms. The RASD, as a guide, through its core principles, can assist Latin American and Caribbean countries in their alignment of public policy and achievement of these goals through a targeted chronological implementation approach centered around these 8 principles, bolstered by the provisions of the 4 axes and their relations to the SDGs. This approach, I believe, should include the following steps, 4 very simple steps. Formulation and/or development of existing regional and sub-regional strategies that allow for adoption and application to local contexts. The second being making the appropriate changes and additions to laws to allow for ease of progression of these strategies. Thirdly, alignment of development programs that allow and empower our people beyond the limitations of national economic context, therefore creating a level playing field in the movement of goods and services across our single markets. And last but not least, improving access to these programs and services through promotion and awareness of regional context and relevant applications to local contexts. The preamble of the Constitution of Guyana under Article 28 says, every young person has the right to ideological, social, cultural, and vocational development, paraphrased. Fortunately, it does not give specific parameters of what the definition of youth might be, because, for example, this panel, given the life expectancy in the Caribbean, is comprised of all youth. Many Caribbean countries may make similar provisions as well. There's been a significant rise in the advocacy and involvement of young and near youth people and associated movements across the region. National youth councils have been revitalized, social development organizations are becoming more active, and young people are increasingly being given a voice. That's why I'm here. Civil society is no longer afraid to stand up and speak out as social systems afford greater freedoms. This, however, is still being hampered in some ways in the Caribbean for one reason or other, of course, with different local context. The RASD can then help in reinforcing the need for empowerment and the autonomy of all people, something that has been denied through previously unchecked social and systematic discriminatory practices, whether or not they were formal or otherwise generated. This should guarantee greater independence and participation for and from all sections of the populace. It can be used to promote development projects, and it can also be used to promote cooperation between states that have managed to work effectively on sustaining these development projects to improve and extrapolate what works to other territories. Working with regional blocs such as UNISOR and CARICOM not only help to improve the financial and technical resources of other member states, but also they help to improve alignment both horizontally and vertically between them and associated bodies. This includes, of course, civil society and other regional and sub-regional bodies that can be guided to form alliances for intra-regional application of best practices with application to local context. A case for such partnership between regional bodies might be forming partnerships with Latin American universities and the University of the West Indies, as well as the Caribbean Examinations Council. Yesterday, the President of Mexico spoke about the entrance exams to universities. And the Caribbean Examinations Council allows an education system through the different territories that allows for young people to streamline themselves along different educational streams, of course, that they would like to focus on. And that helps them to better prepare themselves for access to university. So when they actually get to the university, it's just a consideration of what they've already done and what those achievements in those streams might be, as opposed to an entirely new examination system. These opportunities even extend to cooperation in areas such as agriculture for development, as well as basic and value-added production, to improved public security and healthcare systems, to financial reforms, to healthcare and health rights approaches, and human rights approaches as well, to climate action, and most importantly, the respect for the sovereignty of the people and countries and their right to self-determination in every context. Essentially, opportunities abound for the promotion of access to elements of civic participation as mandated under fundamental human rights in an environment free from discrimination. This is what the RAISD presents. And as I close, a friend of mine back home in Guyana, his name is Nikosi Bruce, asked me to include this in my address, and I quote, "Youth and near-youth persons are the current driving force of the economy and political systems, ever increasingly aspiring to and wielding more and more power. We and our children have to live with the policies made today, and as such, we are at a time where greater social inclusion is most important in the development constructs of our countries." End of quote. As I mentioned before, I see it as no mere coincidence that the Honorable Samantha Marshall and other members of this table have recognized the importance of youth in these processes, a true indicator of the Caribbean region's commitment to including youth in the social development mandate. And as I close now, in advancing the views and concerns of young people, as an advocate and as a representative of the Caribbean youth, I add this to not only Caribbean youth and not only to the representatives here, but also to all youth across the region and everyone else that is listening. Let us not, in our zeal as youth movements, fall prey to ageism. Let us not seek to remove one for the other, but rather seek to achieve effective equality in addressing the needs of our states. I thank you.
Awesome. So, as you can see, it was very appropriate for us to end with the voice of our youth, and Dr. Joseph has assured us that the future of the Caribbean is in very good hands. I want to thank each and every member of our panel for the richness, the diversity, for the wisdom that they have shared with us this morning. I know that normally we go at this point into the the discussions with delegations from the floor. However, we're out of time, and I am sensitive to the circumstances outside of these walls, and therefore I am not going to test the hospitality that is extended to us. I am hoping that there will be an opportunity for further discussion on issues raised. I think that it is important to highlight the fact that social inclusion will not be achieved in the Caribbean without the partnership and the solidarity that was mentioned first by Senora Delgado and echoed by many of the other panelists here, the importance of support, solidarity, and partnership, because financing social inclusion is going to be critical for vulnerable states that face the external economic and environmental shocks of which you heard this afternoon. I want to thank each and every member of the panel for their contribution. I would like to hand the proceedings back over to Senora Delgado. Thank you.
Gracias, muchas gracias. Voy a ser muy breve. Quisiera, saludar la presencia de la secretaria ejecutiva de CEPAL, doctora Alicia Bárcenas. Gracias por estar al final de este panel. Ha sido muy interesante. Quisiera decirles que, como saben, nuestra Secretaría de Bienestar es sumamente activa en estos temas. La secretaria Albores lleva una política de inclusión, de equidad y de desarrollo de proyectos y propuestas muy ambiciosa para México, como lo expresó el presidente durante la apertura del evento. Quisiera agradecer las enseñanzas que yo he tenido de este panel, por supuesto a Diane Corliss de CEPAL por la moderación, a la ministra Marshall por recordarnos que la energía es un factor y su acceso fundamental para la equidad, y que los países del Caribe están desafiados por su vulnerabilidad y necesitan de alianzas y necesitan de soporte para encontrar fondos y apoyo técnico para enfrentar sus retos. También me gustaría agradecer a la ministra Forst por decirnos que sus experiencias y además exponernos la forma como opera su sistema universal de salud, su pensión, al ministro Stephenson por decirnos y recordarnos que la población más vulnerable es la más pobre, y eso ocurre también en México. Y también llamarnos a la atención de este índice de vulnerabilidad ambiental y los 50 indicadores. Me pareció que yo no conocía que existe, y me parece que nosotros es muy útil conocer esta existencia de este índice. A la ministra Ford, las experiencias de su país, de Barbados, en relación a la atención a los adultos mayores. México tiene un ambicioso programa, pero creo que muchas ideas que nos diste, ministra, nos pueden complementar nuestra política también nacional. Y también a nuestro compañero joven, a mí me mueve mucho cuando nos dicen otra vez que el cambio climático no son fake news. Es muy relevante traerlo siempre a la mesa de nuevo, y por supuesto sus 4 propuestas son muy importantes para no solamente los jóvenes de tu país, sino los jóvenes de todo el mundo. I want to end with a farewell in one of our indigenous languages in Mexico. We do have 68 different indigenous languages, and 2019 is the International Indigenous Languages. Les doy un mensaje de despedida en nuestra lengua náhuatl, una de las lenguas indígenas de México, de las 68 lenguas. Macuali yoguali no igniwan, macuali chimuachiltique inanmochan, ni papakipampa huantiasico anmestlatlautia tlazocamati. Muchas gracias a todas y todos.
Para quienes quieran asistir al evento de desarrollo infantil temprano y protección social universal, está ya desarrollándose aquí al lado, al igual que el de trabajo infantil.